All right, so let's set up our player character camera. So I'm going to close Pro Builder, select my main camera here. Now notice my main camera in the view sort of matches what my aspect ratio is inside of the game view. So if I want to do a 1920 by 1080 game, you can also hit plus and add your own custom one. So let's say we want to do 1920 by 1080. It'll match it here. So you can, if you don't have a lot of screen real estate, you can dock your game window there and add your scene up here, and then you can see your main camera. So I'm going to go to sort of move it out a little bit. I'm going to hit E, rotate it, hit W, move it up a little bit. And I'm just going to position this down just a little bit. Now it is helpful to get look at more of the game view at the same time if you have the screen real estate, so you get a better idea of how your player will play your game. So say I want more of a fixed camera for now. We can use things like Cinemachine, or we can script our camera to really follow our player, which we might do. I haven't decided yet, but for now I have this fixed camera, and I'd like to use the WASD or WASD keys or arrow keys to move my player around. So for now, our main objective is to lock this door, and in order to open it, we have to get the key, okay? So let's go into our underscore scripts folder here, and let's right click and create a new C# script called player movement. Now, we know we want to move our player around, and we need to get the key, and we need that key to open the door, okay? So what I like to do is compartmentalize my scripts so that they are best suited for whatever the, essentially the task it's going to do, or for the specific object, right? So I will create a script and I'll call it key, and that will handle anything that's to do with the key, and then I will create another script and just call that door. So this is a great first way to sort of learn how to just think about sort of modularly programming out your stuff. Now remember, we have this player here, this little robot. So I'm going to grab my player movement script and drop it on here. You can also hit add component and start typing player, and that'll add that player movement script that we created. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click this, or you can go over here and you can go to edit script, and as my Visual Studio opens, I'm going to pause the video. All right, so right off the bat, this can be a little scary. So you'll have these things up here, which we don't know what they are yet. We have a class, what's a class? And then within this class, we have these two things which are called methods. They're oftentimes also referred to as functions. So for new programmers, this can be very overwhelming. So the best advice I can give you at first is think about it as though you're learning a language, okay? And within this language, there's certain rules, just like any language. And what we'll do here is we'll start to look at what they're giving us right off the bat. So they gave us these things called comments, and we know they're comments because they're denoted with these 2 forward slashes here. And it says start is called before the first frame update. Well, let me go ahead and type a command, which is a pretty simple one. It's just print, open close parentheses, and then a semicolon at the end. And then within this command, we're going to type hello from start. And I'm going to make sure to hit Control S to save it. And we know that it's saved because it has an asterisk there. Now down at the bottom here, or if we hit Control C, or we go to Window and let's see, where's console? Is it asset management or general maybe? Yeah, console, Control Shift C. And I'll dock this at the bottom. There we go. Okay. When I press play or hit Control P, you'll see in our menu here that it says hello from start. So we created our first programming command where it prints this to the screen. Now what's interesting is, looks like I went to the definition of print, which we will talk about many videos from now. So start is called before the first frame. So what's interesting is this start method is created by Unity, and it runs once before the first frame of update. So here's update down here. So update is called once per frame. So depending on the power of your computer, this particular computer, if we go to our stats, is spitting out roughly, where's my frame rate? I guess maybe let me hit Control P to play that, and we'll see our frame rate. we are getting graphics between 180 to 200 some odd frames per second. So hello is printed already 1,000 times, and it plays 180 times per second. So right off the bat, these two methods that they give us are pretty good for producing certain, by giving us certain functionality. So for example, say I'd like to check, so I'm going to delete start for a second, just clean this up. I'd like to check how often a person presses the key and how long they hold it down for. Well, let's go ahead and create a variable that sort of stores the input of my A and D keys. So if I go to the top here and I go to edit, and I believe it's project settings, and let's see, and here, let me double check for a second. And I go up to input manager here. You could see under axes, there's these different types of input. And one of them is called horizontal. And the horizontal is set to a joystick. There's also another horizontal up here, which is mapped to the left and right arrow keys, as well as A and D. So what Unity did is it gave you this default input manager. And within it, you have all of these keys that are pre-programmed that we can use. Now, the amount of pressure you push is, see how it says there's a dead zone, that's for a controller, but there's amount of sensitivity. So depending on the amount of pressure you push, with keys, there's not much sensitivity, you kind of are tapping them. We want to be able to store that value of pressure and then apply that to the movement of our little robot character. All right, so let's go ahead and create something called a variable. So a variable is just a place to store stuff. So we want to create a variable that stores the number value of a key press. All right. So I'm going to hold control and scroll my wheel out to zoom a little bit. I'm going to close these as well because I want to give myself a little bit more space. So I can actually just create a public, and I'm going to create a float, which is different than an integer. For those of you who don't know, that it's just a number like 1.0. And we're going to name our variable. So I'm going to name this variable horizontal and then input. Now, we know that there's no errors because this variable here, oops, we forgot our n, it didn't have a red line. And so what we're going to do in update is we're going to store in this variable the amount of our key press. Now, in our update here, I'm going to say horizontal input equals. So it has to equal some value. So if I put 5 here, it's going to store 5.0. It'll store that value in there. What I want to do is store the input, and I'm going to get the axis of that key press. And what I'm doing is I'm actually going to get the value of this value here. So let's put this in quotes, and that means we're going to get a string with some sort of word. And that word that we're getting is this right here. So one more time, sorry, under edit, project settings, and we're going to grab horizontal from here, and we're going to paste that in here. And I'm going to hit Control S. And let's go ahead and bring back that print statement, and let's print out what's stored in horizontal input as we save that, or as we play our game. So let's go back in here for a moment. I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to clear this, and I'm going to hit Control and P. Now you see nothing happens, right? But as I press the A and D key, we're getting 0 pressure right now. I get a value, right? Here's all the way up to -1. And then if I push the D, I get a positive value. So what does that mean? Well, if I look at my robot here, and I look at my axis here, say I'd like to move my character, let's say for instance, on the x-axis. Notice the position, as I move to the left, it goes negative. So that would be essentially my A key. As I move to the right, that would be positive, right? So let's go ahead and actually move the transform of this robot on the forward axis, right? So that could be this axis here, or the right axis, depending on horizontal input. So let's go back into here for a second. And what I'm going to do is, actually we should comment this, right? This stores the value of our key press. And if you want to be really good programmer to your teammates to the key press, and then you can just kind of put A and D. And then in here, we're going to do transform. And you might be like, well, where did you pick up transform? Well, notice there's this component here called transform. And we're going to do dot translate. And then inside of here, you can have an X, Y, and Z value, right? So we have transform, and then translate refers to the position. We have an X, Y, and Z value. What we're going to do is we're going to just simplify that, and we're just going to do a vector 3. Now, vector 3 is really this right here. We have 1, 2, 3 values. And the value we want to get is dot forward. So this is sort of a shorthand way of saying that times. And we're going to do time.delta time, which is just the time between frames. It just sort of clears it up. And then we want to create another variable that's maybe public. So I'm going to hit Control D here to copy this public float here. And I'm going to name this speed. And I'm going to grab speed for a second, and I'm going to make it times speed. Now what happens is, let's actually set this equal to, I don't know, 2 for now. Because when we save this and we make these public, it actually shows up inside the editor. So here's our horizontal input. You'll see it update here as we press it, and then we're going to multiply this value by 2. So let's go ahead and hit Control P and see what happens. So now when I press A and D, oops, let's go in our game view. You can see we're adding value, but the problem is we're sort of multiplying this value times speed, but and speed is always moving it actually. So let's make speed 1. Well, here, let's see. We have our character here. We have our horizontal input. And we actually need to set it, because right now what's happening is we're always moving, right? We haven't set the values of A and D yet, right? So we're getting this input, and we're doing it times speed here, right? But we haven't done it so that it is moving according to our horizontal input here, right? So let's actually take a moment and let's change the, let's see, we'll do vector 3 dot forward, and let's see, we'll multiply it times our horizontal input. Let's try that. So let's go ahead and multiply this and do horizontal input. Let's save that. And now when we press play, you can see, oops. As I push my keys, I can move back and forward, and it's pretty slow, and hence the speed thing. So I'm hitting A, it's going back. I'm hitting D, it's moving forward. And you'll probably have to play with these values a little bit. So let's do 10. Let's hit Control P here. There we go. Looks pretty good. So we got our movement going for our A and D. So let's go ahead and comment that, right? So this moves our character front and back. So we'll save that. And all I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just duplicate all of this. So actually highlight all of this and go down. I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate it. And these, we want to do a W and our X key here. And we have a horizontal input here. What we want to do is also grab our vertical input. And this vertical input is going to be equal to, oops, let's undo that. Let's double click that. See, we have a horizontal, but do we have a vertical in here? So let's go back to our edit and go to our preferences here. And let's see, our edit and then project settings rather. And notice we have a horizontal, and yeah, we have a vertical. So I'm going to click on that and copy it. And that vertical is mapped to the W and S key. Fantastic. And so I'll save this and I'll hit Control S. And I want to replace this horizontal input with vertical input. So I'll copy and paste that. And now when I hit play, Let's hit Control P here. And actually another nice trick is if you have this kind of docked and hidden and you hit Control P in your view, it'll actually maximize it to that game view for you. So now notice when I'm pressing our S and D, oh, actually I made a mistake. When I'm hitting W and S, notice it's following along the same axis. So why is that? Well, I'm still vector 3 multiplying it times forward. We can actually do dot right. So let's see what happens when we do that. Let's hit Control P. Now, when I hit, come on. Did I not save that correctly? Let's see. Transform.translate, vector3.right, that's right, times time.delta time, times speed, times vertical input. Let me save that and try one more time. Yeah, there we go. So up and down, left and right. We can actually move in angles, so something like this. So now we have a little bit of a movement system going on, which is pretty cool. I'm finding that when I'm pushing S, it's going up, and W depending on this camera view that I'm in. Actually, I kind of like this view a little bit better. So let's move our camera a little bit, maybe more out here, and rotate a little bit more like that. Let's actually zero these out a little bit. And if you left click on the X, you can play with the positioning and the rotation and stuff. So let's do something like this maybe. And also to kind of give ourselves a little bit more, clearing up this space over here, we can actually select our main camera and just make this black. And then, let's see, for the background, maybe we can do, let's see, window, rendering, lighting maybe, and environment. And let's do, instead of a skybox, we'll do a solid color. Well, it removed a lot from there. Let's do a skybox, but let's see. We'll maybe put a plane or something, or I'll look up really quick how to, so it doesn't render the skybox, so we get a color, because it kind of looks nicer if we're just using a black color for the background. So let's use our skybox. I know there's a way to do it. It's been a little bit for that, but anyway, that's enough for this video. We've got some basic movement, and then what we'll think about in the next video is maybe some camera stuff. And oh, actually, you know what I forgot? Really, lastly, let's just do vector3.right minus vertical input. So we can do, let's see if we do minus vertical input, if it inverts our, is it minus vector3? Will that work? No. Yeah, let's try this. Minus vertical input. Let's see if that does it for us. There we go. Yeah, so now I'm pushing W, the character's moving up. So just a nice little quick trick. All right, that's a pretty long video. In the next one, we'll build on our game.